Talk to us about the pricing pressures, the input inflationary price pressures that you feel and experience, and the strategy to pass that on to the consumer or not.
Yeah, well, first of all, inflation is real, and we're at historical levels, and I think companies like ours, and I would say most of the CPG industry, the first thing we look to do is to try to offset that with productivity and expense control, and so I think we start there in making sure that we do that, and then I think you will notice in some of the information you started earlier, we did price, I think the category price, I think all of us were in line with that. One of the reasons we do that is so we can continue to actually offer value over long periods of time to our consumers as well. I think if you look over the price threshold, we offer value at a lot of price points, and our opportunity to do that, I think, is great as market leaders.
How is the consumer reacting? It felt like Halloween was a bonanza. Everyone was out there buying the candies, even at the price points.
Yeah.
Is there a real resilience, or are you starting to see some people trying to trade down?
Well, I think what we're saying is that usage is still high, but consumers are starting to reallocate what they buy. So, for instance, during COVID, they bought a lot of larger packs. Those larger packs cost more, and so you're going to see average prices go up from a consumption perspective. On the back of COVID, we're starting to see people get back to normal purchasing patterns, still holding on to some of that COVID purchasing pattern, and starting to see what we call individual consumption, i.e. consumption on the go. And so we're starting to sort of see it settle back a bit. But I would say from a consistency and sort of how the prices have moved, how they respond to them, it's been a pretty neutral response. We think we see good consumption. It's still a very rich part of people's lives. Clearly, the ritual around Halloween, this is the first sort of unencumbered Halloween we've had since COVID. So people really are looking back to get back to those rituals.
Talk a little bit about your input costs here. I mean, obviously, Mars and Mars Wrigley is a candy company, to be sure, but a lot of people look at it, investors, if they could invest in it, obviously a private company, they look at it as more of an agricultural company. You are a big buyer of cocoa, and to a certain extent, you're beholden to prices and availability in that market.
Right. Well, a couple of things. Let me give you sort of a snapshot of Mars. So Mars pretty much competes in three verticals. We're the largest confectionery company in the world. We also happen to be the largest pet care company in the world, both on nutrition, with our veterinary hospitals, our veterinary clinics, and then we have a fairly sizable global food business. So you're right. We do have exposure to agricultural commodities, but I think like large companies, we try to make sure that we're trying to cover them over long periods of time in a very smart way, and making sure we're trying to fix our pricing strategies to make sure we're at least with the cycle, not too far ahead of the cycle. And so when we pass through things, we think we're passing through for reasons that are sound, and then we can pass that through in ways that make sense for the category.
Do you manage that through contractual obligations or actual ownership?
We do a little bit of both. And so we'll buy off market. We'll also use instruments to help us to sort of hedge risk into the futures market, which is very helpful for us. And we're one of the largest cocoa purchasers in the world. And so what we do in the market can move markets. And so we try to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense. And again, try to provide value for our consumers over the long haul of time.
Talk to us about some of the other areas of the business. Doublemint gum, spearmint, even the Dove ice cream now that we can get. We all know the Twix and the M&Ms. What does competition look like? We've been having conversations with Mondelez last week, right? And they're a player in that business. Are you competing based on consumer loyalty, on brands? What does that competition look like? Yeah,
I'll say a couple of ways. First of all, we acquired the Wrigley business back in 08, 09. We just really integrated that business starting in 2017 as well. It's a tremendous part of our business, has great margins, has great consumer affinity, has great consumer loyalty as well. And we own a pretty significant share of that as well. And so the growth responsibility is typically on the market leader, which is us. And so we've been able to actually have some recovery on the back end of COVID, because you can imagine COVID sort of shut down mobility. Gum to some extent is built on mobility in terms of why you use it and what are you using it for? And so those things are coming back in major ways. So you've seen acceleration in that space as well. The other thing is the pack types that we use in terms of how people consume. We're noticing that people are actually consuming larger packs because they never want to be without gum. And so we talk about our what we call our mega packs, and ensuring that gum is always available. But
I don't know if my dentist likes hearing that, but go ahead.
It's an addiction for many.
It is an addiction for many. But also, you talked about some of our more traditional gums, like the Free Dented Doublemint, the things I grew up on as well. Those are very fundamental parts of our portfolio, and we have really intensely loyal sort of consumption in that space as well. And so, pretty large breadth from that perspective.
I'm a juicy fruit guy.
Of course you are. are. Of course you are. Anton, we know that you're a man who really thinks about the next generation of leaders, about mentoring, and I'm interested in your own labor force at the moment because this is a time when, after COVID, after an extraordinary time and tumult for your own people, we're now thinking about companies having to pull back. Are you having to think about that when you're looking at the cost side and the expense side?
Yeah, no, very much so. You know, the interesting thing about this next generation of consumers who will end up forming households is that they're very values-based, right? So something as small as a transaction for a piece of candy or a piece of gum, you know, it needs to have context for them. It needs to fit into their larger value system as well. And so we're seeing them make decisions based on something just a price or a transaction. So I think it's been helpful. As it relates to the workforce, you know, look, they want breadth, they want choice, they want flexibility. And so as we start thinking about our real estate strategies, our work strategies, we really have to take more of that into account more than ever before. It's not just having a great work experience, which we think we offer. It is the context of their work experience. It is the context of their work experience in the context of their life outside of work. And how do we start to accommodate all those things?
The CEO of Mars, the Mars umbrella company, as well as the previous CEO, really did sort of make a big to-do and a big pivot to try to create more sustainable products, whether it was the product itself or the packaging itself here. Are you still continuing to do that? And more importantly, why?
Well, first of all, you know, I'll give us some credit. Mars was doing sustainability before ESG really existed. So I would say this is a continuation and an acceleration of that strategy. And so our outgoing CEO, Grant Reed, was a big proponent in taking us from point A to point B. Our new CEO, Paul Wyrick, is going to take the ball and really go faster and further with that. And so as senior executives, you know, part of my long-term compensation is built on hitting some of those goals as well. You know, we operate off something called a compass. Our compass, at the top of the compass, is the typical things you would see in a public company. But at the bottom of the compass is really how do we change the world? And those things in some cases are equally weighted. And so the tension of running a great economic business and still, you know, creating a business that's going to have positive societal impact is incredibly important for us as leadership.